Catherine Anaya. Welcome to MHG TV. In this episode of My Lifestyle, it's Gardening 101, the basics of growing a garden with Valley expert Tony Kasowski, who shows us how.
What we're got going on here is a lot of our spring to summer crops.
Yes, Arizona, you can plant 12 months a year here. That's according to gardening expert Tony Kasowski, who is walking us through a Paradise Valley home garden that is proof of that, with its stunning garden of 30 fruit trees and 20 plus garden beds.
And we're growing everything from, this is a white Italian fig, these are desert gold peach.
Of course, some things will do better in the Arizona summer heat than others, like herbs, which Tony says hold up very well.
Herbs like basil tend to be really heat tolerant and also produce a nice herb throughout the summer.
You know, a lot of people like me look at something like this and we get a little intimidated. So the whole idea is that anybody can learn how to grow a garden, right?
Absolutely. There's no reason to be intimidated. You know, we've got plants want to grow, they want to thrive, they're just like us. So really what it is setting up a proper environment for them to do so. And I would really start at a nursery over a big box store. And even there are some government type of resources like the Extension Office, which is run by Maricopa County. That's a really great place online or at their personal office to get some information and get some help with how to start a garden.
So let's start with the basics. First, you would not approach a garden inside your home the same way you would a garden outside your home.
If you're going to be doing indoor growing, I really recommend either having a southern exposed window or supplementing some light, which I would probably recommend an LED because they're not so hot.
He says microgreens or sunflower shoots and sprouts would be pretty simple to grow, but he wouldn't necessarily recommend growing vegetables indoors.
I would more recommend it as an option on a day when it's 120. You could bring that little baby plant inside and protect it from this harsh environment. Over here we've got a little cucumber.
If you are a novice like me, you don't know the first thing about gardening.
Okay.
What do you need to do?
Well, first things first, I really focus on the soil. And a lot of the soil that you may see, again, at the big box stores is more of an agricultural waste product. So I really recommend going to a nursery or even a hydroponic store to source a bit more quality soil with integrity. Your soil should smell like the forest, nice and fresh, not like the farmyard. And that is really where I start.
Another important element to helping that process is water. Tony likes to filter the water for his gardens, which he says you can do with a handheld garden filter, or
you can actually let your water sit out in a bucket. And what that's gonna do is remove the chlorine from the water, because chlorine is a gas. With that being said, just like we don't want chlorine in our body, we don't want that in the soil. It really tends to kill the microbiology.
He says a lot of people think wet soil is a good thing, which is far from the case.
About 30% of your soil should actually contain airspace. And when you fill up that airspace with water, you create an anaerobic environment and can actually create more rots, funguses, and things that are going to be negative for the plant. So rule of thumb, with even on a hot day like this, you want the soil to feel about as moist as a wrung out sponge.
The hotter the weather, Tony says, the less water you want to use.
So the water in the heat of the day actually takes the sunlight and acts like a magnifying glass and could actually make this all crispy by the end of the day.
That's crazy.
So another thing with water is you want to water in the early morning or in the evenings, and I do prefer to use a drip style irrigation. A lot of the vegetable plants do not need an overhead watering like you would do for your grass.
The container you use is also extremely important, and something Tony says is one of the biggest mistakes he sees.
80% of a plant's biomass is actually underground or in the soil. So when you've got a pot that looks like this and says basil on it, that's not gonna work. So my rule of thumb for something like a tomato, a pepper, an eggplant is usually about a 5-gallon container, and actually a bucket works. Now with those containers too, you do want to make sure that you have proper drainage. Basically, you could do something as easy as drill some holes in the bottom. Most pots that you buy from the store or containers will either have those pre-drilled or where you can just kind of pop them out.
Also, stay away from containers that are black or dark colored because they will catch and hold on to heat and anything that might be stone or concrete. He says terracotta containers aren't bad because they're more weather resistant.
However, I'll see some like large ceramic pots which will just hold on to that heat all day. And when we have temperatures like today where we've got a heat warning for the next few days, that's really going to make it a struggle for a lot of your less tolerant non-native plants.
In Arizona especially, Tony says you have to be mindful of the sun when growing anything from native trees to tomato plants.
One thing that I really recommend if you're going to have a garden is a 50% shade cloth. That's going to allow enough sun to get in to have that plant grow, but also kill some of that heat and that UV radiation that's going to be really so harsh on these plants that aren't necessarily made for our desert sun. Over here we have a banana plant, and this is a dwarf variety. And bananas are more actually an herb, not a tree. This doesn't really have a hard bark. Really similar to like a grass, how they grow. And bananas do good here. You do need to protect them in the wintertime from the freeze.
Is there one item to grow over another here in Arizona that would sustain itself for a long time?
Well, we do have perennial food crops here, and that means basically they come back year after year. One of them that's real easy but necessarily isn't pretty all year long would be the artichoke, which we have an example of over here. Those will come back, however they do die off when it gets really hot. Low water usage, and they do make an amazing flower. I grow a little bit of everything. I tend to find that my clients and myself like to kind of mimic what's on the supermarket produce shelves. Over here we've got some grapes that are, and actually these will grow up this trellis here and cover it.
Bottom line, find what you like, do your research, and if you're mindful of soil, water, containers, and sun exposure, Tony says your garden will grow in no time. What is a normal time frame that people should be giving what they planted?
Well, each plant has specific needs and times for a harvest. Something like a radish could be as quick as 3 weeks, whereas something like garlic, that's going to take upwards of 6 months.
If you'd like more tips and information, you can find Tony on Instagram at Tony Grows Food. I'm Catherine Anaya. I'll see you next time.